To reach our ultimate success, we often have to pivot from one direction to another. Today, our guest has pivoted more than once to create great success. Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We are here each week to help you lead more confidently and make a bigger difference, both professionally and personally. This episode is sponsored by From Manager to Remarkable Leader, Kevin's flagship workshop based on his proven leadership model. Learn more at remarkablepodcast.com/manager. And now here's your host, Kevin.
Sports fan or not, welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. If you are a sports fan, you're going to love this episode. And if you're not, guess what? You're still going to love this episode. Let me introduce you to our guest today. His name is Jordan Babineaux. He's the author of a brand new book called Pivot to Win. He has transitioned from a decade of playing in the National Football League to become a sports broadcaster, entrepreneur, and business executive. He currently serves as the voice of the Seattle Seahawks on both television and radio while helping organizations, teams, and leaders navigate their pivots. Babineaux and his brother, Jonathan, former defensive end for the Atlanta Falcons, formed a company that produced several comedy specials as well as the movie Women Thou Art Loosed. They also launched a specialized car service in Seattle and created the Babineaux Foundation, a not-for-profit that gives back to their hometown of Port Arthur, Texas, and contributes to lupus research. Jordan Babineaux holds a bachelor's degree in mass communication from Southern Arkansas University and an MBA from Seattle University. He lives in Seattle with his wife and 3 children. He is our guest today. And Jordan, welcome.
Kevin, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and be able to share some conversations, share ideas with you and your audience. So thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. And I have been to Port Arthur, Texas many times. It has been a while, but I have been there. When you have clients in the oil business, you find yourself in Port Arthur.
I was going to say it. I was going to say maybe you're passing down, checking on the oil. It is heavy industrial, heavy refinery in Port Arthur. In fact, Port Arthur is home to the biggest refinery in the U.S. And many people don't know that about Port Arthur, but the Keystone Pipeline starts right there in Port Arthur and heads up through the Midwest and all the way up through Canada. So
that is true. So listen, man, I'm so glad that you're here and excited to talk to you. I mean, obviously, I said a little bit in the intro, but tell us a little bit more about the journey that leads you to this, to being an author, being executive. Like, I'm guessing usually, here's what I say usually, Jordan. I'm guessing that when you were 10, you didn't think you'd do the things you're doing. But I'm guessing when you were 10, you had a dream to be in the NFL, but maybe not the rest. So tell us a little bit about the journey, if you would.
Yeah, that's one of the incredible things about, some of the things that I like to say is to love the journey. Because we all have aspirations and dreams and desires of things that we want to do, see, and become. But it's hard work, right? It's not always a straight line. It's not always, very direct or even quite, laid out in a sequential way where you go from A to B to C. It's like, well, I go from D to J to K to X and all the way back to C. And all right. So there's that's kind of the road of success and what it's been like. As you mentioned, I'm from Port Arthur. I grew up in Port Arthur, Texas. I'm the youngest of 5. And, having been to Port Arthur, you've seen the economic conditions where, a great deal of the population of people live in poverty. And certainly I was surrounded by drug abuse and violence, where the streets seemed like a faster way to make money. And when I was 8 years old, our lives changed forever. My father passed, and suddenly my mom was left to raise 5 kids on her own, each to graduate high school and college. And my brother, Jonathan, went on to play for 12 years with the Atlanta Falcons as well. So we had this this childhood pact, at that time, it was certainly a very moving and tough time for us going through that loss. And, we can hear the wails of moms, all the way through the house. And my brother and I looked at one another and said, when we grow up, we're going to play in the NFL. Now, look, we didn't know that we had a better chance of winning the lottery, nor did we know that, how to be NFL players. But all we knew is that we wanted to plant this seed, this seed of hope and vision and opportunity and focus, that with the help of a power greater than both of us, we would one day achieve those goals and they would manifest into reality. And certainly with that in the back of our minds, as we both journeyed through high school and on to college, it became a reality. In 2004, I was an undrafted free agent. And in 2005, my brother was a second-round draft pick by the Atlanta Falcons.
It's some good stuff, everybody. And I got to tell you, we're talking with Jordan Babineaux about his book, Pivot to Win. And I've got to tell you all that I can't say it's the best part of the book, Jordan, but the opening of the book is written by your mom.
It is.
And it's I'll just say this, it's worth the price of admission. How about that? So that's really, really, really great. So since we're talking about the book, the title is Pivot to Win. I love the word pivot personally, but I'm curious. Well, I guess two things. First of all, why the word pivot? And then secondly, why write the book?
Yeah. So great question. So a lot of, the comparison I have from sports, I share in some of the similar conversations in a locker room I share now with a lot of the business executives and corporate world that I'm now embarking into since I've pivoted from the NFL. So the word pivot is, it's really a technical defensive back term. So I play defensive back, right? And it's, you kind of always have to, pivot, or turn and run or change a direction, right? So everything that embodies the definition of pivoting. I know maybe last year in 2020, it probably became the word of the year.
Yeah, it was one of the words. I mean, after COVID and social distancing, pivot sort of became the word. But
Yeah.
I wanted you to talk about it. It actually is one of my favorite words, and I think about it because I grew up playing basketball, not nearly to the level that you played, but I think about pivoting in basketball. Same thing. It's
Absolutely.
I've got to change directions, right?
Yeah. And I use a great example in the book. One of my favorite basketball players and basketball teams growing up in Port Arthur was the Houston Rockets. And if you remember Hakeem Olajuwon, the dream, man, he had the best pivot move for the big man of all time. He would hit you with the dream shake, and he would go one way and elude the defender and free himself up either for an open shot or for an opportunity to kick out to Clyde Drexler or any of the other great Kenny Smith, any of the other great sports stars that were available on the floor to him. And it's very, very similar to, I think, what we're experiencing both personally and professionally, and certainly corporations and organizations are having to pivot. Our country is in a pivot. And then personally, we're all in a pivot. So whether we're, completely changing directions or we're looking for a way to free ourselves up to find what, I say score, which would be equal to new opportunities,
right,
in this surreal time of COVID, is really, kind of the essence of the word pivot, and very much where I wouldn't say very much where the book come from. It certainly wasn't derived from the fact that COVID. I started writing this book the summer of 2019, and then COVID just happened to hit, and it just kind of sparked, what seemed to be very relatable to what now everyone is experiencing. So the book was, was conceptualized prior to COVID, and then even through COVID, I was still writing the book, but now it certainly feels relevant. But I'll say it's from sports for sure, having to pivot, but certainly is relatable in life and in business.
And you use that idea and help us think about that all the way through the book. And it's really great from that perspective. You tell a story in the book And I opened, before I hit record and you and I were just chatting, you said, well, not everyone will be a football fan. Like, they won't be, but hopefully we can, for those that are, or have that connection, it'll be great. And even if you don't, I think the story I'm going to ask you to tell that's in the book, I think if you're not a sports fan, don't get lost in the details of what Jordan's about to say, because Jordan, you played at a Division II school, not a big school, not an NFL player factory by any stretch. And after, as you got ready to go into your senior year, maybe you were hearkening back to that pact you made with your brother about we're going to play in the NFL. And you said, I've got to figure out how I'll play in the NFL. Talk about the choices that you made that led you to the NFL, because there's a bunch of choices that you made between your junior and senior years that made that happen. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah. I think this is the part of the book, or just in life, when a lot of times we miss this simple concept of things that we want, and all we have to do is ask, right? Is that, just ask, and sometimes we kind of forget that little simple element of, getting things that we want. So between my junior and senior year, I was really set on understanding what it was like to play at the next level. I reached out to my brother, who was at the University of Iowa, and I asked him to find out if I could get permission from, a Division I championship organization with the University of Iowa and Coach Ferentz, if I could come train with their athletes, with my brother, but with the other Division I athletes. And, I wanted to put myself in a position where I was like, I could know where I stood or where I ranked among, this potential of talent that the NFL was coming to choose from. Here's the other lesson, Kevin. The other part is that when we want to reach a new level, it's imperative that we surround ourselves with people who are already at that level, or, working towards that, right? I mean, this is like, doing something before you're the person that you want to be, right? If you want to be a great dad, you should probably model yourself and hang around other great dads. If you want to be a great community member, look at the ones who are doing, really succeeding well at it, and start modeling yourself after that. Well, I wanted to surround myself with other Division I athletes so I could see and have a measurement of success to find out where I ranked among this talented pool that the NFL is coming to choose from. So it did two things for me. One, when we put ourselves in those positions, if we're not mentally prepared, it can certainly derail us, right? So I'll use Carol Dweck's definition of a fixed and growth, and a fixed versus growth mindset. When we experience failure, even though we were in maybe a tough environment or a competitive situation and we fail, a fixed mindset will start to identify themselves as a failure. Then they'll huddle back into doing things that they're comfortable with. When you embrace a growth mindset and you experience failure, you look at them as opportunities to grow or to learn or to figure out how can I do it better. And so from a mindset standpoint, moving into those competitive environments is really essential that you have an understanding of where you are. And so when I did that, it took my game and my, to a whole new level. I was out there for 3 months, sleeping on my brother's couch, training with them at 5 a.m, and then again in the afternoon, 2-a-days, rather than, partying or hanging out with friends in the summertime and doing things that wouldn't, push me to reach this ultimate goal of becoming an NFL professional football player, or at least having a chance to, right? I mean, it was at least having a chance, right? At least I knew I did all the work that I could to have a chance. Well, that summer I went back to Southern Arkansas, bigger, faster, and stronger than I'd ever been before. I had met with an NFL scout who said that I should look at special teams. Look, if you're not a starter in NFL, you play special teams. That was my way in. I knew that if I had a chance to be drafted, it was in the later rounds, but I knew my way on a team would come through, on the field what happened because of special teams. Well, I went back to Southern Arkansas and made All-American. I was a Division II Player of the Year for special teams, and then had a chance to work out in front of 19 professional football teams. And, the Seahawks gave me a chance. as an undrafted free agent, which is still hard to do, Kevin, with trying to make a team as an undrafted free agent. But, I was determined, I was relentless. And all of those things that I talked about, one about asking, about, having the right mindset, and then surrounding yourself with a talented group of people that can pull you up, level your game up a bit, were all of the things that went into, that successful attempt in making it to the NFL.
I think you lived it, not me, but I want to add something to what you said about once. So I'm sure there's a whole story about you asked a question that probably didn't get asked very often. Can I come train here? And there was no guarantee they were going to say yes. They said yes. You got there. All that is great. You're with other folks so you can compare yourself to them and grow around them. But the other thing that I'm guessing, tell me if I'm wrong, is that by surrounding yourself with those people, those were people that many of whom did have the aspiration of playing in the NFL. I'm guessing most of your teammates back home didn't really have that aspiration or didn't take it seriously.
Right.
Fair?
Yeah. And the other part too is just from a competitive standpoint. I mean, when you look at Division II, there's a certain level of competition. When I met with that NFL scout, he told me you have to dominate, right? I mean, you have to show that you're the best person on the field, which was something that I really took to heart that senior year.
And clearly you became an All-American. So I would say that happened. So, throughout the book, in every chapter, at the end of every chapter, you have a recap, and you have these short little pieces, all of which I know could be expanded upon. And one of those is, you said that we need to cultivate persistence.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that a little bit more in different parts of your life? Obviously, as a player, certainly since then as well.
Yeah. So when the cultivating persistence part is, I would compare it to, here's a football analogy, beef up, right? In sports, you gotta beef up. You gotta, lift weights. You have to work out. You have to train your muscles. The comparison to building persistence is exactly the mental component of what it takes to find more grit, to be more resilient, to face adversity with confidence. So failure, trying again, you're building persistence. Looking at adverse situations and going through them anyway. You're building persistence. Now, it doesn't mean that you're always going to be successful. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that in gaining these elements or these exercises that really challenges the mental muscle, those are inner feelings and confidence boosters. I think when we face adversity, because that's one thing that I promise you will happen to us. Look, Kevin, you and I both know once you set a goal, everything around you will try to compete with your interest to take you off path of achieving that goal. And sometimes it's just the very small and subtle little movements or decisions or friends, that really challenges us to be congruent with the person that we desire for ourselves. It's a real challenge, but even in the face of adversity, and when you're facing those adverse situations, being persistent or having that grit, showing that determination, persevering over the course of an obstacle, despite the odds of the unknown, all of those to me are part of building the mental muscle and the resilience that we need to have more grit, to be more persistent and to have more confidence in the face of adversity.
And I love that. I think it's super important. I just really was struck by the idea of, some people say, well, I'm persistent or I'm not persistent. And you're saying we can work on it. Carol Dweck, growth mindset, I can get more persistent. And you give us a bunch of thoughts about what happens when we do that and the value of doing that. But just even the idea of cultivating it, I think is a really powerful idea. So, I mentioned to you before that I've had another NFL player on before. Gary Brackett has been on with me. And I don't know if I asked him this question. If I didn't, I should have. I'm going to ask you, though, because as an athlete that competed at the highest levels in the biggest games, you had coaches. You had coaches from when you were in Pee Wee football all the way up through. And as a business executive now, we know as leaders, we have to be coaches to our teams. So my question to you is this: what did you learn about coaching from all of your, or from some of you, or from one of your coaches? What are some coaching lessons we can all take from what you learned from having great coaches?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some of the greatest coaches, at least in my professional career. Well, I had 3 head coaches here in Seattle. Coach Mike Holmgren, who won a championship in Green Bay. Jim Mora, who competed quite a bit. His father was a championship coach. And then Pete Carroll. I was here for Coach Carroll's first year, and he went on to win a world championship as well. And so you talk about 3 different personalities. It was quite, a spectrum of, how they approach the game and how they, went about and creating and building a culture. Pete Carroll, as the world knows, has created a culture of competition. It's that, his motto is always compete, no matter what, no matter what we're doing, no matter where we are. I'll give a quick example, and then I'll jump into maybe one of the most valuable lessons I think we all can take away, whether we're leading a team, leading our family, part of a team or not. This is one key lesson that I think that we all can take away. Well, Coach Carroll was so competitive that during last season, which, the NFL, successfully completed a season during the middle of a pandemic, the Seattle Seahawks were the only team in the NFL to have 0 positive cases, 0. And you say, how did they do it? Well, Coach Carroll made it a competition, right? So the NFL had these watches that all the players had to wear and would just track, close interaction with other players. I don't know all of the details because even as part of the media, the building was closed, right? It was very
they didn't want you infecting anybody, Jordan.
No, look, I've been good. We've been safe, for the most part in terms of virus free. But I think it was just fascinating that Carroll found a way for the position groups to compete against each other for the least amount of close contacts. Now, I know that was just one of the things that he did, and certainly there are other things that he did as well, within the organization in terms of how did they do that over the course of a full football season to have 0 cases, 0 positive tests for the virus. It was pretty remarkable. So the one key lesson that I want to share, I think it's important for anyone, whether we're part of a team, whether we're leading a team, leading our family, or in charge of leading an organization. And I think that we all can be better at is communication. And I say communication and it's kind of broad in that sense. So let me dive a little deeper, right? So in terms of, having effective communication with our team that's centered and focused on achieving a specific task or a certain goal or current objective, whatever it is. Here's the undesired behavior of communicating: disrespect, lack of clarity, no eye contact, right? Response time, right? Versus the desired level of communication, be direct, be, clarity, eye contact, response time, right? Increased response time, respect, honesty, integrity, right? So in looking at that, as simple as it is, I think that we've all been a part of a team or part of a conversation where we've shared something with someone else. They went out and did it their way, but because of the lack of clarity, it wasn't clear to the expectation of the person who asked them to do something. So I know it's you say, well, that's simple. Yeah, I know it is simple, but sometimes your understanding of how you say things to someone else is very different than how they interpret it. So really being specific about the way we communicate, whether it's in a job description, it's in someone's fundamental approach or contribution to a project, being specific about what it is that you want them to do really can help eliminate a lot of pain points but also help you be more effective, one, as a leader, and more efficient in your processes or in your achievement for that particular goal.
So for those of you watching the video, we had a little hiccup, but we're back. And for those of you on the audio, you don't care. But if you're on the audio and you want to watch video in the future, you can do that. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com. But Jordan, I was going to ask you a question about, most of us in one sport or another have played on some sort of athletic team in our life, but we haven't played at the high level that you have. And so I would love for you to just sort of talk about the lessons or the connections or the contrasts even between being a successful part of a successful football team versus a successful part of a successful organizational team.
Yeah, that's I really love the comparison between the corporate world and sports teams. And while I hadn't personally had a lot of experience in the corporate world, I've been a part in a lot of those conversations. Many of them are friends and great mentors and people that I share conversations with, about the economy or decision making, or even, just helping one another stay connected or achieve, or provide an unbiased opinion, for something that they're looking to or having some difficulty making a decision on. So I'm very aware of a lot of things that happen in the corporate community. What really stands out to me is that, as I shared with you offline before we jumped on, I'm about, less than a month or so away from completing my MBA coursework at Seattle University. And so that's given me even greater exposure into some of the challenges that organizations and teams deal with. One of the things that one of the books that we had to read, Senior Leadership Teams, and which really kind of is the essence of building high performance teams, effectiveness, communication, leaning on each other's strengths, with, not tearing each other down, learning. And so the authors talk about, the separation of two different parts of the essentials and the enablers. And it's like really just like 6 things that can really boost the effectiveness of a team. One is deciding even if you need a team or not, right? I think that's, one element of it. But 2, once you have a team and establish that, it's one voice. Alan Mulally was essential for his time at Boeing and at Ford Motor Company, is that, we're on the same team and we may disagree about, what needs to happen, or the next move or the business process or the top initiative that we want to take on this year, but it's one voice coming out of, this meeting. When we leave here, we're one voice.
That had to be the case on the team, on the football team, right? Like we need to really have the same voice when we leave, and we're talking to now the media, which is where you are now, right? That has to be connected.
Yeah, you have to be connected. And, but, sometimes there's always a squeaky wheel or someone who leaks something. I mean, let's be honest, right? I mean, there's not, you're not 100% integrity when you kind of having these closed doors, private meetings about, business affairs and processes. But I think what's really important is that, and I want to miss the fact that it's still a compelling vision, right? Whatever this compelling vision towards what we're trying to achieve is the essential buy-in that you need from all team members. And then it's about getting the right people on the team and getting the wrong people off the team, right? And that's the hard part, right? It's finding the right people that's doing the right role, in the right role, that's making the right contribution, but it's also aligning with their strengths. I also think too, and this happens quite a bit on football teams, we see position changes, right? One player may not be a great fit at receiver, and so maybe they move to defensive back, and then they shine. They have a great year or, a great career. I mean, that could also be the case when we're trying to figure out, we have this one team member that feels out of place and they're always negative or going against the grain or, always playing devil's advocate. And maybe they're just dissatisfied with where they are. And, if they're underperforming, then probably not the great position for them to be in. And you don't want to get rid of them just yet by giving them an opportunity to self-correct, or, a 3-month, 90-day, 30-day type of plan to show improvement before you make a real significant change. I think maybe even offering a new position would be something that you can see in terms of performance, better performance in that particular person. So I think those are some key components, and I'll leave it there. Certainly we're all working, toward one vision, or working with one vision towards one common goal. But oftentimes when you have like a team member that may be out of line with the other team members, and you may not want to get rid of them just yet because they still perform at a high level, it just may be in the wrong position.
Perfect. So we've spent the last 30 minutes or so talking about life and business and football. And now I want to talk about you just a little bit more. I've got a couple of questions just for you. One is, Jordan, what do you do for fun?
I love to golf. I love golf in a sense that, when I hit a bad shot, I think golf has that symmetry in life too. It's like you got to deal with the decisions you make. If I hit the wrong club and I hit it in the water, or if I make the wrong decision and it costs me, more money or more time than I want.
Yeah, there you go. You like to play better when there's money. I'm just betting, guessing.
Look. One of the things I know from having gone through my own strengths assessment, competition ranks really high up there with me. So if we can compete, man, I'm always trying to win.
All right. I guess two more questions. The only question I told you I was going to ask is this one. What are you reading? And you said I got lots that you can talk about. What do you want to share with people that you're reading, or that you would recommend for folks?
Yeah, well, right now, I think what's probably essential for anyone who's either looking for change, in the middle of change, or headed for a change, I really like the Heath brothers book called Switch. It's a really good book that gives you, the comparison of the elephant and the rider, which they contrast as the rational and emotional side, and then carving this path, to really align yourself and create real sustainable change. The Heath brothers Switch is a good one. And then I mentioned Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. I'm also reading that one as well, which I'm almost done with that one. But I've already finished the Switch book, and now looking for a few other good reads that I have lined up that I've been waiting to get to. But that probably won't happen until after commencement date, man.
You got 5 more weeks. And in those last 5 weeks, I'm just guessing there's some other reading that you have to do that don't include Switch or Mindset or those sorts of things. So
yeah, but that's all right. It's all it all stacks, man. I'm excited to be exposed to all of these different readings and new lessons and behavior changes and things where I know I see personal gaps, but I also can get better at. So always looking to improve, Kevin.
Perfect. Jordan, before we go, tell us where people can find more about you. Where do you want to point people to learn about your work, to learn about what you're working on, as well as the book? Where do you want to point people?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thanks for having me. You can follow me on all of the social media platforms, whatever you choose to do. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. It's Jordan Babineaux across all platforms. If you're interested in the book, you can get a free chapter download by going to the website pivottowin.com. That's TOWIN, spelled out, pivottowin.com. And there's a free chapter download there. And then I have some more things in store that I'm looking forward to post-graduation. It'll be online trainings and different webinars and seminars and a lot of freebies that I'll give away. So feel free to reach out and engage with me. In fact, maybe even share what's been your biggest pivot of your life and how you handle that, or things that maybe that you've learned from yourself or from the environment. So happy to connect with others and share more conversation about change.
pivottowin.com, everyone. And Pivot to Win is the book. And Jordan Babineaux has been our guest. And now before we go, though, I've got a question for all of you. The question is, now what? What are you going to do with what you just got? Because if you just keep running in the same direction, listening to podcasts, being entertained, then nothing's going to change. You have to pivot. You have to ask yourself, what did I get and what am I going to do with it? So I always challenge you to say, what am I going to do with what I learned? Not just what did I learn? And so learning only makes a difference when we act on it. That's why I asked you that question. Jordan, thank you for being here. It's a total pleasure to have you. I enjoyed our visit both before we hit record and after we hit record as well. So thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Kevin. Take care.
All right. Before we go, everybody, one last thing. This episode has been brought to you by Remarkable Masterclasses. Each month, we release a new skill in an advanced form of the masterclass format designed to help you become the remarkable leader and human you were born to be. Details on how to get on board for a specific skill or to get discounts each month can be found at remarkablemasterclass.com. And that's a wrap for another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We'll be back next week. I hope you'll be back too. Thanks.